Alrighty, welcome to another episode of the One Last Cast podcast. My name is Jonathan, and as always, we have Merrill Solesky here. Say hi, Merrill.
Yo, how's it going, guys?
We're in the middle of summer. It's hot outside. Kind of ties into what we're going to be talking about today of night fishing. Um, I know you're excited. I'm excited.
Yes,
It's
can't talk
been
enough about it.
uh, it's been it's been a it's been a good summer so far. I know I haven't been fishing as much. Merrill, I know you've been fishing a little bit more, but it's been a pretty good summer. We've had some kind of weird weather systems, but it's just been good fishing.
Yeah, it's so weird that I had to travel to Florida to do some fishing.
Yeah, how was that? How was that Florida trip? I saw some pictures online. You
Yeah. So I used to do a lot of inshore fishing. Night fishing was my passion. I love, like, it still is my passion. I just haven't done it as much. To be quite honest, I haven't done it recently as much. I think the last time is when we got caught out in the storm, and I think I shared that story. Me and Nolan got caught out in the storm, waited under a bridge. It was lightning around us. Wait for that to pass, and then we went back out and caught some fish. But mainly, my main focus is going offshore. So I'm looking for those better surf days, smaller waves. So I'm not getting tossed around out there with waves as I fish, you know, offshore, so to speak. So I've been doing a little bit of offshore fishing, and just to me, it's just my main focus right now.
Yeah,
Um,
we all have a lot of things going on. I'm trying to just keep going with my job, and I know you have jobs kind of lined up the wazoo.
yeah,
It's just hard to get out there and fish, but I do know that night fishing is very popular, especially during the summer because let's be honest, it's hot outside. I know we haven't really hit triple digits yet, but it's like in the 90s, and I can probably say by like 8:30, if I'm not waiting, I'm like, why am I out here?
right. Yeah.
um, but yeah, I actually I went out this past weekend and did pretty good. Met some new people, went out there, and I remember like the trout just weren't cooperating, and I really wanted to get some trout. Um, and at 9 o'clock, I'm like, man, if I wasn't waiting, I'd be in my car heading home by now. It's just so hot. um, Before we get into night fishing, because I know that's what a lot of people are going to be wanting to hear us talk about, uh, give a shout out to our sponsors, Knocking Tail Lures. That's our go-to soft plastic. If you're interested in finding a paddle tail that swims on a fall with a built-in rattle in the tail, go to knockingtaillures.com. Also, DSKA, Darty South Kayak Anglers, looking for a great group of guys and gals to talk fishing and kayaking with up and down the Texas coast. Go to Facebook and search DSKA or Dirty South Kayak Anglers. Also, for a printing, they do all of our merch and towels and stuff like that. I have this custom buff here that Aaron did. So if you have anything like that, reach out to Aaron and he'll take care of you. Um, and also, Meryl's lovely wife, Brittany, if you're looking for real estate, either commercial or residential located here in Houston, Texas, reach out to her. You can call her at 281-740-0498 or Brittany Solesky, that's Britney Solesky, Solesky at gmail.com. Yeah, so Tommy in the comments right here is saying that great mood for
Yeah.
night fishing this weekend. Storm in the Gulf is kind of lining up a little bit.
Oh yes.
Um, we've kind of discussed previously in our some previous episodes about night fishing. I know we had John Liu kind of specifically talk about fishing with lights out on like the Texas City dike and stuff like that. But for us kayakers, when we're talking about night fishing, generally we're talking about those underwater green lights, sometimes overhead, going to the backyards of canals and people's docks and stuff like that. Um, if you're trying
Also,
to,
yeah. Also, I mean, also hitting the moonlight light. I guess, or just sometimes fishing a reef at night where you catch them during the day. Um, the fish don't see the same things we see. so they're still able to hit that lure. Working rock growings at night, I've done that before,
Yep.
but mainly. So I want to start off like with why do I love night fishing, right? What made me uh, like it so much, other than the weather aspect, right? Like there's no sun, right? It's nice and cool. There's not a lot of people around you watching you that could see you from a mile away. You're catching fish, and they come and drift right on top of you, right? You're kind of in the dark, fishing for the most part, fishing the canals and lights and stuff. And what I liked the most about it was actually the behavior of the fish in the lights and watching them position themselves with the current that was in the canals or out in the bay, how they position themselves with the current, and then how they were. To me, the target zone was in the lights on the outside or sometimes in the middle, but watching how they ambush the bait or attack the bait, or if they didn't do anything, right? But you were able to visually see how the fish behavior was in the light. So I actually learned a lot of fish behavior by watching what they did in the light and how they responded to bait, and then how they swim. Like sometimes they're just lethargically swimming in the light and they're just not, being aggressive, versus like you pulling up to the light and you just see all this commotion, explosions going on, and they're just tearing up bait. That's always an exciting. I still get excited when I see that, like you're pulling up to the light and they're just tearing up shrimp or big, huge mullet. If I see them tearing up big mullet, there's big fish in that light. So I mean, that still gets me excited. That still gets me going. And just taking my time, and just working these lights, working these strike zones, or if I decide to fish a reef, just going out to the reef, posting up, and just working the reef. Finding their behaviors. Are they on top of the reef? Are they behind the reef? Are they in the front of the reef? Are they staged in the front? So these are different strategies that I do at night, with obviously a 360 light, so somebody doesn't run me over. But I guess we'll get into what's needed right later to night
Yeah,
fish.
yeah,
But
yeah. We'll get to that.
yeah, but
Um,
that was one of my. So I started bank fishing, right? And I'd fish at night because that's the way my work schedule worked. And I was one of those people that was I used to drink heavily, and then I kind of stopped drinking, and then I got more consumed with fishing, so I kind of replaced the habits with it. But my dad raised me. He was a shrimp, he worked on a shrimp boat, and he was also on the water a lot, so he showed me a lot of fishing. But I really started honing in on their behaviors and doing what they're doing with throwing a cast net. I knew how to throw a cast net, so catch bait, put it on a pop and cork, fish at night, because that's the way my schedule was. And so I just kind of got like consumed by it and started studying their behavior. And one of the first places I learned that was Clear Lake, Kima area, that little discharge zone. So I studied those a lot. I studied that whole area a lot. I still fish it like daily. So, but that the night fishing part was is what got me like passionate about it and studying it, and excited about it, right? Like I'm still excited about it. So,
yeah.
well,
No,
what do you what makes you love night fishing, or do you even love night fishing, Jonathan?
no,
Because I know you don't fish it too much.
yeah, it's I haven't fished it in a while. However, it's mainly because of how things have happened in, my life. I have a wife and kids. It's kind of difficult to get out there at night now. It's much easier for me to go out, during the day. Um, and Ben, there's no big fish in Clear Lake. I don't know where you get that. That's bad intel. Just letting you know. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. There's
um, but uh, one of my most favorite memories night fishing, and this is how much, this was probably back in 2013 ish. So like almost 10 years, over 10 years ago. Um, it's I remember back when the trout limit was 10. My buddy and I were out there. We were in Sea Isle, and it was a weekday. I was in college, didn't have much responsibilities back then. I just got to make sure that my I studied and did my homework and got to work on time. Didn't really have anything, um, and I was out there. It was well past. I think it was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning at that point. We've been out there for a little bit. We were just having fun catching, releasing, and I remember I was like, I'm getting tired, and I just laid back in my Hobie in the middle of a canal, super quiet. Looked up, I could see stars up there, and if I every so often you could just see a blip of a shooting star kind of thing. I'm like, man, that's pretty cool. And I just sit there and lay there, and then every so often you hear pop, and then another one pop, and it just every single time I'm like almost about to drift off to sleep, like just laying in my kayak in the middle of the canal. I kind of tense up and like look up and I'm like, oh, there's a trout over there. Let me go and pedal over
Yeah.
there, catch a trout, and then release it, lay back down, and just wait for another pop to come up. And I remember like looking back, I wish I appreciated it more, but I'm glad I have that kind of memory. And it's uh it's a good time because you're right. There's not a lot of people, and you get to see some real cool stuff.
Yes.
If you've never been like had opportunity to go sight fishing before, you're basically sight fishing. Not all the time, but you can a lot of times you'll see just big trout or big reds just swimming around the light, and you could you know pitch in there and you're gonna catch a fish. So,
And you get
um,
overly excited and you
oh
bird's
yeah,
nest and then you throw
oh
it
yeah,
right. It never goes as planned when you see the big ones in the light.
yeah. But I think we should definitely talk about that because for some of the people who haven't gone night fishing for whatever we're talking about, we're definitely want them to get into it. It's basically like I said, we're in the canals behind people's houses, specifically like we're Galveston, so that's where we have it. But everywhere has lights. Corpus has lights. I'm sure you could find some in Port Arthur somewhere.
Yes.
Freeport has lights. You just kind of have to kind of pick where you're going. Um, Obviously, be respectful. That's not don't cast onto people's docks. Um, and the big thing is you have to be accurate. Um, and I think one things people don't realize is that we're very visual people. Humans are very visual. So doing anything at night, especially out out in Galveston and even behind people's houses, sometimes the lights, they don't have like dock lights or anything like that. It's just an underwater green light. Your night vision's all kind of messed up, and it's very easy to miscast. You can
Mhm.
do during the day. You'll never make a mistake casting. During at night, you're going to make every single mistake casting. So, one of the things I did, initially when I experienced that is, I had went to my backyard at night, and put a little hula hoop out there and just walked around different areas and practice casting into that hula hoop. That's You'll get used to it, and that way that whenever you do have the opportunity to find a big old trout, big red fish in a light, and you can get it exactly where you want it to, um, that's you can execute on the opportunity.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Um, so I mean, night fishing can, you know, we can go on a topic on a rant on stories like that we've had. Big shout out to my homie Mark Baker. He's the one that got me. I learned a lot from him tarpon fishing, and he hooked onto a tarpon on a fly rod about an hour ago, which is awesome. Uh, I actually hooked onto two tarpon at night. I've seen so the two tarpon I hooked at night. I didn't see those tarpon, and I caught those on a DOA shrimp. And these fish are humongous, and you catch them on a little glow in the dark DOA shrimp is what I used at night. And I was fishing for like trout and redfish, right? Just seeing these blow ups, throwing in there. Most likely it was trout, and I hooked up to a tarpon. Um, and I seen one like closer to Sea Isle where you're at. It wasn't in Sea Isle. It was another subdivision by Sea Isle. But I saw like a 40 pounder. And then just seeing them in the lights was like a shock for me because I was the first time visually seeing a tarpon. and in this area, the water is always clear,
Oh
always.
yeah.
Like you can see straight to the bottom, like about 90% of the time. I think me and Jeremy Swift fished it one time, and we just took a picture of all these trout that we caught, and the night we fished that area. But seeing a tarpon in a light was surreal, right? Like you said, you get to see these cool things, and just seeing that in a light at night fishing, seeing big trout in the light, like huge trout. So imagine, like, you ever see the fish in the light and then you catch it and then you bring it up and it's bigger than what it looked like in the water. And so sometimes you see these big trout and you're like, man, so if it looks like 25 to 30, 25, 26, it could be bigger. It could be a bigger fish than that.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, it's just night fishing. It's just it can go in many directions. I'm gonna let you dictate this one because I'm too excited about it, really. So I'll tell you stories. I mean, me and Justin have so many stories of us night fishing, testing lures, fishing, and then fishing the causeway was one of my favorite nighttime fishing spots because it was one of those areas where you could catch trout, but it had a rhythm to it where you could catch the bigger trout. And if you knew that rhythm, you were always the one that always caught the bigger trout. And sometimes you have to muscle through dinks and try to get lucky. But I mean, there's always something about the causeway. But now that the lights are off, I think they changed it to the story is they changed it to the LED lights. The LEDs went out and they just haven't replaced them. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've as far as I know, the lights are not on anymore. Kind of sucks because uh, I've I've only been a couple times night fishing out in the causeway, but the couple times I've been out there were like, obviously I'm counting even the dinks, but there were like both times were like 100 trout nights, you know.
Yes.
It's like every single light, no matter what you did, you just throw something in there, you'll catch trout.
Yes.
Um, and that, and of course the current too made even the dinks made them feel like 18 inches. Uh, and the occasional redfish, you're like, oh my god, this is like a 30-inch trout now. You know,
Right.
you
Yes.
just be catching, little dink trout. I didn't say that because like it's just you knew it was a dink, even though they're fighting hard, and all of a sudden you throw in there and you feel a thump, you set the hook, and it doesn't move, and it comes to the surface, thrashes. You're like, oh my god, this is gonna be like
Dude,
that
dude,
one
we've
big giant trout.
we've seen them where like they were shallow. Like if you're on the not the island side, but the Tiki Island side, and you know how it's real shallow before it gets deep.
Yep.
I've seen them where the redfish are on the first couple pylons and huge trout were in the first couple pylons,
Oh
and you
yeah.
could see them cruising through there. And I later on I started seeing people fly fish there, like during the day and nighttime. And they're standing right there and they're just fly fishing, and because it's got some structure right before you get there. So, but I mean, that was a pretty cool show. I tell people this a lot when the lights were on. There was no other place like it. It just felt like a very unique spot. Almost reminds me of the Gaiman Bridge down south. I've never fished it, but watching them fish that area, and they're always catching fish. They might be catching better quality fish down there, but I mean, the number wise, you would catch more fish at the causeway, I feel like, than anywhere, more trout than anywhere else I've ever experienced. I mean, I've had really good days where we're just nailing trout, but you could consistently go to the causeway and
Oh yeah.
catch those amount of trout all the all the freaking time. And not only that, it was like there's YouTube videos of it still out there. There's a ton of videos still out there that them fishing the causeway, and it's just now it's not, kind of like rollover pass. It's just one of those
Well,
stories,
at least the causeway's still there, so maybe there's a chance that
Yeah,
they'll come back
yes,
with it, you know.
hopefully, right? Fingers
Yeah.
crossed.
Yeah,
And
but
it was one of those days. You had a bad day on the bay. Who cares, man? I'm gonna go fish causeway at night and just get my confidence back. Like I'm not a complete loser. Hey, Kyle Manick, nice fish. I saw your post earlier. nice fish that you caught. Looked like you got some good ones.
Yeah. I actually wanted to kind of go back and talk about the moon. I I know our conversation is probably going to veer a little bit slightly off topic just because of the way the conversation is probably going to go. But right
No.
now it's June 18th right now. We have a tropical disturbance in the Gulf. It's expected to veer into Mexico somewhere, and however, today we are experiencing pretty high storm surge. I've seen the videos over in most of the docks everywhere on the bay. The water's over the docks at this point. Um, the surf is looking pretty rough and hairy over in Galveston. Um, and
They closed down pins. Pins
uh,
was
they also
closed down.
they also closed down the dike at 7 o'clock. So half an hour
Oh,
ago, they
yeah.
closed down the dike too. So uh, we're I know we're kind of in the vein of night fishing, but this kind of storm, I actually really like, for multiple reasons. Obviously, I rather not have what we experienced like during Harvey, just because like that's damage to people and people's livelihoods. I don't ever want that. But from a fishing standpoint, whenever we have big rain events, it's fire. If you know like exactly what's going to happen with all that fresh water coming down, you just position yourself in an area where the rain isn't affected. That area usually 9 times, I would say even 9.5 times out of 10, it's going to be just amazing because um, a lot of the fish are going to be pushed down from the fresh water. They won't go far because there's usually salt water somewhere underneath, but some of the fish are going to hop down. um, Generally that tide is going to be pushing out a lot of the times because you just have an influx of fresh water coming down, so that's going to push down the bait, and the shrimp and stuff like that. So these areas where aren't really that affected by all this freshwater runoff, it's just going to load up on bait, load up on shrimp, load up on mullet, and all those fish are going to be just chowing down. um, and the reason why I know that multiple times on these big rain events, Harvey, some of the even after those big storms that we've had um, recently here in Houston, I forgot what they're calling um, uh, that storm that hit Houston, where we had like basically mini tornadoes everywhere. But anyway, yeah. But basically, even that one, um, they just fishing in these areas where you're kind of out of the way of the runoff, but I'm trying to
he's
be.
he's trying to say he's not trying to say San Luis Pass, but San Luis Pass. He's
See,
not trying to.
I need to bring people. My goal is to bring people to water. I can't force them to drink it, so you don't need to just spell it out for them. But yeah, like San Luis Pass. Even if you look around, like the areas around, I guess west
Yeah, yeah,
of the Galveston Ship Channel. Um, those areas are just going to be just
yeah,
stacked
and
up with fish.
yeah, any south shoreline, right? Like I've done really good when that happens because even when the water's pushing down, that south shoreline does not get affected because you got the pass feeding it, and then you got the other entrance was the jetties that's feeding it, and the water's actually just dumping out those ways, like to the sides, like the Brazos, right? You got it just ripping through the Brazos, but that West Bay South Shoreline, man, that's all fair game.
Yep.
Those inlets and outlets on those big marsh areas, dude. I mean, when the tide starts dropping after a storm, it's
Yeah.
those nights where those are days to remember.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And actually, it reminds me of one of it's not, it wasn't after a storm, but a storm was occurring earlier in the day. Jay Lee and I, back when I lived in League City, he'd just like, hey, let's go fishing. I'm like, yeah, let's go. I miss those days, but
yeah,
he was like, let's go wait. We went night waiting over by the pass, and we covered lots of water, and we had the kayaks, and we just kind of went over some of these sandbars and stuff like that. Um, And man, it was amazing to see such clear water out there because at that point um, it was clearing up a lot, and we would see on these ridges and humps, we would see redfish just cruising along. Occasionally, you would just see a trout, spooking up some bait, um, and we've eventually just what ended up happening was we were just drifting out there, and I remember we're fishing into the morning, and I was just kind of like getting ready for the morning bite. I put on a top water, and I just heard what sounded like, I thought it was rain. I was like, man, is that rain? And it ended up being just big old school of redfish just busting up bait. And the bait was running away, and it was just small little like little glass minnows or shad or something like that. But they were running away, and it sounded like every single time they hit the water, it just sounded like a bunch of water drops.
Right.
So, um, and I remember like as quick as it happened, I tossed out there, had blowups after blowups, got I think I got 2 redfish, and then it became like dead quiet. Like that was it. And that to me that was just amazing because you just go from crazy hectic blowing up, and of course like you can't see anything because we were out there in the middle of the night,
Right.
and all of a sudden just nothing.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah,
uh
that man, I've heard stories like that a lot, like where uh like what is it called? Water what is that? Pirates Cove. I call it Pirates Cove.
yeah.
But what's the launch spot? Waterman?
Watermans. Yep.
Waterman's. They're going out to Waterman's and they're passing Pirates Cove, and then you start circling around the back end, and there's a little marsh in that you pass, and there was a ton of redfish back in those little marsh area. There's a little small marsh area, but it was back in that marsh area, and they had them pinned up against the shoreline and just tearing up bait. And man, I've heard really good stories about that. I've never personally experienced that, but I've heard that at least 3 or 4 times, because there is like redfish that hang out in some of those canals that goes back that way. Like there's a lot of redfish that hang out back there, so it only makes sense that when they do come out and they work in the marsh and feed in the marsh, and it's weird, right? Because it's like it's not in the lights, but they're still feeding.
Oh yeah.
In the marsh,
Yeah, and I've also had uh I've been out there full moon. Um this is also, I think this is, yeah, this is during the summer. It was full moon. I was also at the pass. This is kind of also a cautionary tale of being out there at night. But we were out there, and we had another school of like mullet just get blown up in front of us. We're catching trout. And then the school of mullet started turning towards us and started like running through us, between us. And we were waiting. We were probably about like thigh deep water. And you just feel them like just running up against your leg. And the kind of the oh crap moment was whenever like we had our headlights on. We're just like, oh, this is so cool. And then you could see this like shark in the distance start coming, and the edge of our lights start coming between us. And we're like, okay, we're gonna just hop into the kayaks and just let this play out. So
yes, definitely. If you're gonna night fish and wade, drag your feet. You should always drag your feet.
yeah.
But where he's talking about there, I don't think I've ever gone there and not seen at least a handful of stingrays. And they're not scared of you. Like they'll go towards you. They're curious sometimes. Sometimes they'll swim away, but sometimes I've had them come right up to my feet and just curious, like what's going on here. You definitely don't want to get hit by a stingray. They can be very painful.
Yeah, I think the rationale, the way that they think they can feel your vibrations, but the idea that I had in my head is that whenever you walk, you're obviously kicking up sand, um, and whenever you kick up sand, you're kicking up stuff that stingray may want to eat. So that's why they like to go behind, behind you or around you, because they feel like all that sand being kicked up.
Right.
It's also the reason why, like I know in Florida, people look for stingrays when they're sight fishing for like cobia, because the stingrays will be just gliding, and then there'll be a cobia behind it that whenever the stingray just goes over it, just scares up something, the cobia will eat it. So
I know they do that with manta rays.
oh,
Big
that may
manta
be
rays.
it. May be a ray. Yeah, maybe one of those manta rays.
Oh, okay, yeah. No,
Yeah.
I know. I've seen them. Like it. I've been out like in our base system and seen huge manta rays come up, and it's these things are bigger than you,
Oh
and
yeah.
they come up out of the water and they splash down in our base system. It's crazy, man. Especially when you're offshore, and I've seen them a couple times where the cobios are hanging out like around them, you
Yeah.
know. But you definitely be cautious because some of those manta rays they're huge and they can hurt you if they land on you. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
definitely one of those things where you got to cruise on the outside if you can see them and the water's clear enough and chunk at them, see if you get you a cobia.
Yeah.
Um,
It looks like one of our listeners, Mike Jones, actually got popped by by a stingray recently.
oh,
Um,
recently, jeez.
yeah, 4 weeks
Sorry,
ago.
bud.
Yeah,
Sorry, buddy.
looks like he stepped in a hole, lost balance, and he stepped back. So he stepped back into where he was originally walking, and he got popped.
Ooh,
Um, so yeah, I hope uh, fast recovery. It looks like it's almost done, and he'll be back out there soon.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's another thing that I guess in combination with the storm and everything like that. Um, I remember it's probably a couple years ago. It was after not a heavy rain, but it was a good enough rain. We were fishing over in Dickinson, um, and along the way out there was a couple lights, overhead lights, and I was actually really afraid that we weren't going to catch anything that day because the water just looked like chocolate milk.
Right.
And I was like,
That's
man,
typical for our base system.
oh yeah, it was pretty bad. Like I kept checking behind me because like sometimes with these quick rain systems, what's going to happen is just the top layer is going to be dirt, fresh, and then the salt water will be underneath. So there's plenty of times whenever, I'll be out there, and especially with the Hobie, you'll be pedaling, and the behind you, you'll see the wake of clear, clean water underneath that fresh water. I've had that happen multiple times, and but it wasn't like that. And but we got to these overhead lights. It was I think it was three of us that day, and there were just trout busting up in those lights. They didn't care. It obviously wasn't fresh enough for them to be deterred, and every single light just had trout just busting up in it. Um,
Right.
so I think one other thing that we should potentially talk about is what we throw, because you already mentioned
Right.
the glow in the dark DOA. We've said this
Yes.
plenty of times. So, what are your favorite lures to throw while out there?
So I like like if I know there's redfish blowing up on mullet or bigger bait, I like the chicken on a chain with the truce tail. I just recently started throwing the knocking tail lures ones. So um man, I like those too. At nighttime, I like the white with truce tail, knocking tail. That's another one of my favorite baits. DOA shrimp. I work that bait if they're being very picky or finicky, and they're just not being too aggressive. So there's a lot of ways to work that shrimp. One way is to just slowly glide it across, like a gliding shrimp. If you ever watch shrimp and how they swim or their patterns, I try to mimic that. And then there's the pop, let it drop, right? Let it just glide down. I don't think the tsunami glow in the dark fall the same or glide the same as the DOA shrimp. Another one of my favorite baits is a tsunami glow in the dark, and it was actually a client that I used to took out. I want to say several years back, and he got me hooked on those. And he was like, "Bro, you should try this. This works. This and that." And I was like, "All right, man. I'm always game to try new things." I put it on, man, and that sucker was pretty good. Um, at night, my favorite bait to throw would probably be the DOA shrimp glow. That's
Classic.
that's just, and I dance that, and the reason why is because I probably fish when I go night fishing. I used to fish a lot of lights, but I now fish a lot more reefs And the way that shrimp, I'm able to glide that shrimp, or even something with the weedless hook, where I'm bouncing over the reef. I'm just barely over the reefs. I call it dancing over the reefs, but like you just barely dancing over that reef, and then sometimes when you come in and right where the reef ends, boom, they smoke it, right?
Oh yeah.
Versus like a rat tail, or your other tails, whatever, um, paddle tail. Sometimes when you're bringing that across, it drops too fast, right? Or you get hung up in the reef. So you're hopping the reef versus gliding and bouncing off the reef and then falling, right?
Yeah.
So you more likely get hung up unless you're weedless. And I'm talking about shallow reef, right? So the reefs that I'm targeting, um, well, I target deeper reefs too, but the one that I'm referring to that I like to throw the DOA with is 3 to 4 feet, sometimes even 5 feet deep from the water surface. So I'm working a 5 foot water column, you know, um, and depending on the tide, it gets 5 to 2 feet. I've seen it where it almost pokes out of the water.
Those winter tides.
Yes, yeah, right. Um, and so that would be my one bait. I do love a fat boy at night too. So a fat boy would probably be my second bait, and I like throwing that up against like opening mouth openings. So if I'm like wade fishing or I'm drifting a marsh and it has a main water flow that comes in and out, and I'm working that system, the fat boys is my favorite. The shallow part that goes into the deep, or sometimes just working the shallow. They're out in shallows feeding before they go back into the deep. And I pay attention to what the mullet or the bait's doing. If I see them getting blown up in the middle of it, that's where I'm fishing. If I see them getting blown up against the shoreline in the shallow ends, that's where I'm fishing. If I don't see anything, I'm starting off shallow, going my way to deep. Um, and I try to work my way into a spot, not get into the middle of the spot and start fanning out, because
Yeah.
sometimes when you do that, you'll spook those fish, or you'll spook a school of mullet that'll spook the fish that were there. So, you gotta, that's just one of the tactics I do. But I think
Yeah.
a fat boy would be my second favorite nighttime bait. The way they thump that thing, man, I just,
Yeah. You can't beat that.
yeah, and there's nothing glowy about it, right? It's just a fat boy, right?
They do have glow in the dark ones though.
Oh, they do. Yeah. So
They
I throw
do.
pink and the
Yeah.
purple one. Those are the two colors that I throw. The pink
Yeah.
and then and the mullet color one, which is the gray and black with the red little neck, right? Those
Hmm.
are my favorite ones. The mullet color, the pink one, and the purple one. Those are the
Yeah.
ones that I like.
Generally, I at night, the times that I've been, I throw the fat boy. Um, it's usually during the winter if I'm fishing at night and I'm on a reef. That's really the only time I throw it. I have it with me, and um, it's mainly top waters for me. If I'm open water, because just you know, fishing at night in the top water is just a different experience. I mean, you can't really see the top water explosion, but you can hear it. Especially on a calm night. A lot of times I'm not even looking at where I cast it. I turn my head so I can hear it. So I can hear the clack, 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 and then boom. You can't see it, you just hear it.
Yeah.
Um, and I like to play a game whenever that happens. I try to guess how big that fish is in the first like split second based upon the blow up. Is it going to be big because they exploded on it, or is it going to be a little dinker? Um, but yeah, uh, like I said, I haven't been night fishing in a while, but my go-to, and it's more recently, I should say actually, probably last year I went a couple of times with Jay. It's night fishing because we went out early and fished some lights, and then we fished during the day. Um, but
That doesn't
actually,
count, Jonathan.
doesn't
No, I'm
count.
just
Okay.
kidding. No, I'm
Um,
just kidding. No, no, no. Tell me about it.
yeah, yeah. It's a lot of times, especially like during the spring, whenever they're fishing, the fish are eating those tiny glass minnows and shad and stuff like that, real small. My go-to has been the like the shad. Is it the shad assassin or the panfish assassin? I'm gonna look this up because I definitely want panfish assassin. Um, Yeah, I think it's a shad assassin, not the panfish,
Okay.
because those are too small. They're like 2 inch, 2.5 inch, baits,
Right.
um, and they're real small, but they match the hatch so well, um, and I've been finding that you can throw the small baits anywhere with big results. I
Yes.
yeah, I years ago, and there's a video I posted on our YouTube page, which, by the way, if you want to find us online, you can find us at facebook.com/one last cast podcast. We're also online at one last cast podcast.com. You can find a lot of stuff on there, but also if you look on our YouTube page, I have a video, um, where I was using a Trout Killer 2 Junior. It's another small 2 inch, 2.5 inch bait. It was so light that the current was taking it, but that's how I was doing the presentation. And at night, you want it to be as natural as possible.
Right.
So, like an 1/8 ounce jig, and um, I know I'm a big like believer in the 1/4 ounce jig head, but at night you may kind of have to put that 16th to an 1/8 ounce jig head, just because either way the fish are shallow because you can generally see them, so they're not going to be on the bottom unless they are. And then you could you work it, you just like swim it back and forth. Usually like to keep the rod tip down, also because you don't want them jumping, and also another thing that you can, whenever you set the hook, you're pulling away from the structure for a light, but you're gliding it down, and they usually just can't stand that and they'll eat it.
Speaking
But
of
like,
that, yeah. Go. Okay. Go ahead. I thought you were. No.
no, no, no.
Yeah. Speaking of that, like you bring
Yeah,
up a good point, right? So one of the best techniques I like in the lights is I try not to throw towards the dock, right? Or towards anybody's property. I try to throw like mostly like I can keep it in the water,
yeah,
and I try to
parallel to
throw
it.
way
Yeah,
past the strike zone and then bring it through the strike zone, whether that be the reef, light, or opening of a mouth channel, whatever you're doing. And that presentation is always, I like to see which way the fish are facing. So if the fish are just circling around, you'll kind of just watch them. I always say when you go up to, we'll say a light, you go up to light, you assess what's happening first, and you can see what the fish are doing first. Just watch them, right? You don't get overexcited or anything like that and
yeah.
throw, because 9 out of 10 times you're gonna catch the smallest fish out of them, right?
You gotta throw right in the middle of them. That's the plan right there.
Yeah. Heaviest weight you got.
Yeah.
Splash it right in the middle. But no, try to see what they're doing, see how they're facing. And I try to, 9 out of 10 times, they like to put their nose up current. And you throw it up current and you bring it down current. But I've seen them the other way. It's happened, right? I've seen that. But most of the time, watch what they're doing and see what they're doing. And that'll help you adjust on how you need to position yourself before you come up to them. Watch them from a distance and see what they're doing. And I mean, I'm not talking about the ones that are just in the light crazy and just ambushing it, right? Obviously, you're going to get lucky, right? But I'm talking about the ones that are the smaller schools. They're not too aggressive, but they're feeding here and there. Kind of watch what they do. Sometimes you can watch the pattern of the bigger fish and watch what he's doing, and you'll see that sometimes he's doing the same thing over and over. And if you can see that pattern, right, what he's doing over and over, like he'll swirl in the light and he'll go to the left, right? Swirl in the light and he'll go to the left, right? Swirl in the light and go to the left. Okay, I'm going to throw it in front of him. So when he swirls, my bait will be at the right point. When he comes into the left, that bait will be right there. And that would increase your chance of hooking up to that fish.
Yeah.
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
go
no,
ahead.
you bring up a really good point because, especially since we mainly kayak, you want to position yourself in a way so that you're not running over the light, and you're giving yourself the best chance for success. So, uh, for me, I do know that I do preach that, whatever gets you out in the water, you don't have to have the fancy Hobie, native, or whatever with pedal drive kayak. I will say a pedal drive kayak is really helpful at night, because even if you're perfectly positioned and you're targeting that redfish is probably going to make a beeline towards the nearest structure, which is literally right there. Um, and you need to do all you can to fight the fish and get yourself away from it. So, what I used to do whenever Hobies didn't have reverse is that, yes, I would position myself away from the light and I would like drift by it, but also I knew the way that the current or the wind was pushing me, so that if I like did a hard right rudder or left rudder, I'd naturally veer away from the light. That way, if something happened or I hooked up and I had the option to, or a couple times I know I did is I put myself in position and I would flip the drive around, because at the time that's what we did for reverse, and I would hook up and just pedal all the way back as far as I can, pull away from the dock, and then I can play the fish out in the middle of the canal. So um, it if you have the opportunity to get a paddle drive, you don't need it. It's just keep your paddle on your lap and get ready to react to what the fish is doing. Um, especially in areas where, we said Sea Isle, you said Pirates. Those are really good areas.
Yeah.
There's lots of lights there.
Overhead white lights. I like throwing a subsurface bait too.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you're like throwing that DOA shrimp or you're throwing that bait and it kind of sinks a little bit, right, too far deep, and you want to stay in the top water column, a subsurface bait like a Yozuri that only goes like 6 inches, 3 inches, a foot under the water, that could be a ticket too for success. Those overhead lights. I didn't mention that. Sometimes that was my rescue ticket, right? When I'm getting here at a light and I'm watching them getting tore up and they're not biting my bait, they're not touching my bait, a top water or a subsurface bait, and that was the ticket,
Yeah. Just to complete my thought here, even with you paddle guys, it's just get ready to have your paddle in your lap. If you hook up to, especially to a redfish, it's mainly redfish because they'll bulldog you all day, all night, I should say, not all day. And get ready to just paddle backwards. Because especially like those areas like Pirates and Sea Isle, you have other opportunities. It's not that bad. It's not that big of a deal, but in smaller areas where you only have a handful of lights, you really don't want to run over the light. I mean, sometimes it's unavoidable. But whenever you run over a light, or even sometimes when most of the time you catch one fish and it kind of shuts off the light for a little bit, but you don't have other options to cycle through. So, put yourself in a position and just get ready to push yourself away from it. Yeah. And Jay says like, sometimes you just got to throw the kitchen sink to see what they want. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
Yeah.
I remember that you mentioned that paddle. So I used to night fish in a paddle kayak.
Yeah.
I first started off on the tarpon. I remember like grabbing the rod and the paddle at the same time, like this number here, right? So I'm grabbing like that, and I kind of like the rod's bent over on the fish, and I'm trying to paddle back, and then try to keep the line tight, and then try to paddle back. That was it brought up that memory with backpedaling and trying to pull them away from the structure, because some of those redfish, they're brutes, man. If you get in a good school of them, we're talking like some brute redfish, like they'll pull you in.
Yeah, I've also I've seen definitely, especially if you're a paddle kayak, get a paddle leash, because especially if it's your first time, you're not as experienced with this. I've had it was in Bayou Vista, those lights over there. Some guy caught a redfish, and I saw him hook up on it, and like in the middle of his fight, his paddle floated off. And like he caught his redfish taking pictures, and then obviously he looks up and is like, "Where's my paddle?"
I can't tell you how many times I released pliers into the water, not the fish. When I first started off, that was like a natural thing. Like, oh man, I gotta get another pair of pliers.
Oh yeah.
But Mike says I want to catch a tarpon. Mike, that's been a tough one for me. It's been a several years studying journey for me, and not too many people in our bay system which is the Texas coast, target tarpon on a kayak. Um, Other than me and I think Mark Baker, were probably one of the few that do it. I'm pretty sure there's other people that do it. I was successful last week?
Yeah, you said
Last
last
weekend.
week. Yep.
Last weekend, I was able to land one in the yak. But it was a lot of crying, a lot of times going out and swinging and missing, right? You're in a kayak. In a boat, you're able to move around. You can move around in a boat. Kayak, you're limited maybe 10, 20 miles, right, for that day. And then you got to come back,
That sounds
right? But
exhausting.
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. And that's even if you get lucky, right? You could
Yeah.
see them and not catch them, right? So catching them at night was by accident, by far accident. I was not, other than seeing that one tarpon, and I cast there for like 45 minutes, praying to God that 40-pounder came back, and I gave up. Right, he didn't come back, but he was feeding on small shad. And the other two times that I hooked up on those tarpon was pure luck. Pure luck. Didn't know they were there, and I just got lucky at nighttime. The smallest one was the funnest one because he was so what is the aerobatic
Acrobatic.
or acrobatic. He
Yeah.
was so acrobatic. And the thing is, like, you're in this tight area, these canals, and this guy's jumping and he's shooting towards the pylons, and then he jumps over here, and then he shoots towards the other side, and it's it was fun. Like, I like those fights because it's challenging. I know I like also fighting big bull reds up against structure because there's a way to pull them out and finesse those big bull reds, but you got to have the right gear. You got to have the right gear. Those guys will break your heart, break your feelings a lot.
50-pound braid.
Yeah.
Heavy action rod.
Like 5-pound braid.
Yeah.
2-pound test. No, I was kidding. No, but yeah. So if you got time, I got a couple videos on my Facebook where I'm muscling bull reds off of structure. And you can see me all like getting turned around and get dizzy.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I got a couple cool videos. They're pretty old though. I don't even know if they're still on Facebook, but I guess they're archived, right?
Yeah, they're still there. It's just
I haven't even looked at.
they probably look like they were taking on a potato.
Yeah.
You can
You're
have
right.
those horror movie grainy video footage kind of things.
Yeah. So I mean, I will get better. I kind of want to get back into that, man. That was a lot of fun when I did that. And how many people used to tune in back then? A lot of people used to tune in, but now that I think I got where I need to get, where I can get a cool setup and we could start doing that again, but I miss doing that at night. That was a lot of fun. Most of my videos were nighttime fishing, but it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
What are your thoughts for leaders at night? Do you throw
Don't
any
need
bait?
them.
You don't need them?
Don't. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing. No, I just like saying that. The secret is, procure and a little bit of hot tui on that sucker. You know what I'm saying?
Oh my
No, I'm just
gosh.
kidding. I'm just
Oh
kidding.
my gosh.
I'm just kidding. No. You ever use Procure?
Yeah, no, I usually like to use it. I have the guide size bottles. I it makes me feel better. If it makes me feel better, it makes it fish better. So, um,
Right. No. Sometimes I've used Procure and it was like, man, I'm getting better action with the Procure on it, right?
yeah,
But yeah, I use leaders and clear. Like I feel like leaders. If I know I'm targeting redfish, fluoro or
yeah,
flounder. If I'm targeting trout, mono. I like to use 25-pound tests. I don't like to juggle too much. I'll just do a 25-pound leader, maybe about a foot and a half, maybe 2 feet, and tie the knot where it can at least go through the micro guides. So yeah, I like using a leader.
yeah.
I feel like if I can see it, maybe the fish can see it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just maybe it's just preference, but I do use leader.
Just knowing the fact that there's a dock right there generally, I and just like I said, if you know you're targeting redfish, yeah, I'll probably definitely have a leader. I definitely have a leader at that point. But when I'm night fishing, I kind of always had a leader, um, just because at night, especially in those canals, this water sometimes got super clear, and it just seemed like if you had straight braid, which I originally liked to do, just straight braid, they just didn't touch it, or they wouldn't touch it as much. But the big thing now is that, fishing them with that dock nearby, I just had to put
Yeah,
on a leader just for that
right.
extra abrasion resistance.
Yeah, and fishing at nights, you see a lot of things that can be predicted like during the daytime. Like you see patterns, you see things. I'll give you an example. Um, when the freeze happened and killed all those mullet, I was on the water. I'm one of those sickos. Yes, I fish in every weather. Snowing when it even snowed down there. I think I did a video with snow on ice on my beard. Um, but I was there at Jamaica Beach when I saw those mullet, and I like these guys. If they don't move, they're gonna die. And you could slowly start seeing the mullet come up. So I was there watching those schools of mullet not going to the deep part of Jamaica Bay, the main channel in Jamaica Beach. They were staying the shallow end. So I got to see those in the freeze, how they died and they sunk to the bottom, and everybody took pictures and went all crazy and said they were all 24-inch trout when realistically there was a couple small sandies and all bait fish.
Yeah.
But I think what keeps them there is maybe the danger, because there's big gar, there's big trout, there's big redfish in that main channel. And that keeps them in the shallows of these canals and some of these people's backyards. But yeah, that bait fish, most of those bait fish, I was there when they got killed. They started dying. And we caught fish in that situation. The main canal is where all the fish were at, the big fish.
Oh, yeah.
And they were hidden. They were feeding. And they weren't in the back shallow ends, which sometimes they are.
But. Like I said, one of my freeze story was that I went out there. It was super. I had ice forming on the reel. Ever since I reeled in, you just get the accumulation of ice on the guides.
Oh, yes.
And I remember, like, I know they're gonna be here, but man, I'm so cold. And there was a boat out there already where I wanted to fish, and it was like in this 10 to 12 foot hole. I'm like, man, I don't really know how I'm gonna fish this. And I started working the drop off, and I was catching them in 2 to 3, 4 foot of water.
Nice.
And it was just like, okay, I guess they're right here, and they're all nice fish. Yeah, you just sometimes I tell my wife this sometimes, I wish I could just remove all the water in just one spot, just so I can see, or not remove, just see in the water, have a clear vision of what's down there and what the fish are doing. I guess similar to what they do with live scope now.
Right. But, I was just about to say that.
But just seeing down there, and there's areas where I'm sure there's a 30+ inch trout just hanging around out there. You just never know.
Right.
But I think that's why we keep coming back fishing. It's just trying to figure out the puzzle, but also you don't know what's down there.
Yeah. I mean, they got technology now that's amazing. It's just how much money you want to spend. All right. But yeah,
actually,
technology is crazy.
You know what's real cool? Speaking of technology, I think it was a couple weeks ago. I was just doing my doom scroll through TikTok or Facebook or one of the reels. And apparently back in the 90s, Game Boy had a game called, not a game, it was a program that you could run on your Game Boy for a fish finder on your Game Boy. It was literally a cartridge setup that you inserted into your Game Boy, and it had those deeper fish finders, the little circular ones. Yeah, it was attached to a deeper, and you just tossed it into the water.
No
and,
way.
and it would connect to your Game Boy, and it would be your fish finder.
I did not even know that.
Yeah, I need to look for it, but I recently like, man, that's so cool. Um, Mike Jones is saying there's too much technology on the video side. Yeah, it is what it is. You know, if it at the pace of this technology, I could definitely see in 10 to 20 years that fuzzy live scope imaging is going to be like HD.
Yeah. Right.
um, it so actually, we've been talking for a while.
Yeah,
Let's
we
get
didn't even. I don't think we've gone through any of the questions, man.
yeah.
And I did want to give a shout out to a tournament this weekend,
Oh yeah, yep.
and I got a sneak peek of the trophies, man. I'm not gonna tell you what they look like. He told me to not tell you guys what they look like, but man, I might fish the tournament just so I can. You keep the money. I just want the damn trophy.
Okay, you heard
Yeah,
that. If Merrill wins, he's going to give away the money.
I will. I
Uh,
will. Right. If I fish it, I'll donate the money. I don't. But I want to keep the trophy. It's such a cool looking thing. When I saw a sneak peek of it, I was like, man, that's a pretty cool plaque. Not plaque, but trophy.
Trophy, yeah.
Yeah, sorry,
But yeah,
trophy.
if you're interested, this Saturday, the 22nd is going to be the Saltwater Survival Series. Still plenty of time to sign up. Go to saltwatersurvivalseries.com, and you can sign up there. I think I know this weekend is the trout tournament, so it's I believe three trout is the stringer to bring in with the live weight bonus. Remember that. Oh wait, I don't know if it's three anymore. I had to double check
Yeah,
double
it's
check the
three.
rules. It's three. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, the
double check the
rules.
rules.
Oh yeah, double check the rules.
Yeah, I don't remember. I know it's
But I
three
know
trout
it's
right now,
you got to
but
be in the Texas Park and Wildlife rules. So most likely it's going to be the 3 under 20.
yeah,
So your target's 19 to 20,
yeah,
and try
uh,
not to go over 20
yeah. Don't go over
because
20, but read the rules. As any tournament should read the rules to
yeah.
make sure. But yeah, feel free to sign up. It's always a great time. I'll be there if you ever see me. See me, say hi. Love meeting new people.
You got
Um,
stickers to hand out?
oh yeah, I still have plenty of stickers. Yeah, come and say
Yeah,
hi,
hit
get a
up
sticker.
Jonathan. Get a
Yeah,
sticker. Rep, and I'd love it if you guys rep us. We
yeah.
appreciate
See,
that.
see Merrill with a cool trophy.
Yeah, yeah. Say
Um,
nana nana boo boo.
yeah. Actually, let me
Yeah.
get this one. Their trophies are always cool. So this is their previous one. I know
Oh,
it.
I want to go pull up. I wonder if let me go get my flounder one. Should I go get my
Yeah,
flounder one real quick? Yeah, the flounder one's cool.
yeah. So this one's the Heroes on the Water one that Jay, Lee, and I won this past year. But yeah, if you're looking for a good tournament to join, um, yeah, yeah, if you're looking for a good tournament to join, definitely go do the Saltwater Survival Series. Um, John, I do see. I think you had a previous question. Wanted to answer it. Um, I know it's specifically to Merrill, and I'll let him chime in. What are your thoughts on having a fish finder or GPS, something for depth and structure? I definitely would recommend it. Let's Merrill show his trophy here.
So these are little barbs from stingrays. So at the
Oh,
teeth of
really?
barb, yeah, they're stingray barbs. These are real
Oh,
stingray
that's so
barbs.
cool.
Yeah, I know, right? That was awesome. I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, that was in 2017. Wow,
That's
that's how many
gotta
years is that?
update your trophy case there.
Who knocked the dust off that one, right? Oh,
um,
that's good.
Yeah, so we had a question from John here. He's asking, Merrill, what are your thoughts on having a fish finder GPS, something for depth and structure? I'm assuming specifically for night, but it could apply really to anything. Um,
I used I used to be don't need it, right? Fish finder. Um as the more I'm fishing, it's such a useful tool. It really is. It's something to use as a source. So yes, definitely if you can get one, get it. Um
it doesn't need
and
to be fancy. It definitely doesn't need to be fancy. So,
well, I wouldn't say that. I like all the bells and whistles that they
oh
have.
no,
Some that they got some that give you the topography of the area around you and the side scan sometimes, and you'll
okay,
see a
so
rock that you never known to the right hand
okay.
side.
So Merrill is being bougie over here, and he has all the money in
Yeah.
the world. Um, you know,
Sorry,
just
guys.
yeah, for me, just get like a Lowrance, hook two or the Elite series. They're usually like $100 to $200. You can find them on Facebook,
Right.
Marketplace or Craigslist. Um, and I will say that having the fish finder, the depth finder, it's really just a depth finder. I don't really use it to find fish. I use it to find depth. And there have been days whenever I go out and I forgot to charge my battery, and when I don't have it, I feel like naked. Like I just feel out of it. And having that depth, just looking at it is very comforting, knowing like, okay, this is like 4 foot right here. And being able to visually see that that drop off from like 4 to 6, or hey, I'm paddling along and it's usually 4 foot, and it suddenly comes up to like 2 and it drops back down. So you find this little hump or a little sandbar somewhere that you didn't know was there. Okay, I can keep a mental note of that. Having that GPS marking little locations like that, um, and so I guess maybe having some of the higher end stuff, like I've for me, like I found a Lowrance Hook 7, 7-inch screen for like $100. But it has the capability for me to basically mark locations and also like put in, type in little things like hump or something like that.
Right.
I can put that there.
Right.
Um, so yeah, as I get older, I'm really appreciating those larger screens, so I don't have to strain my
Like,
eyes as much.
like,
Yeah, I
oh,
still
you gotta
have.
put your hands over it. Like, what the?
Oh, no, I got the Burley Pro sun visor thing,
Oh,
so
nice, nice.
but I still have my like 4-inch screen, and I'm like, man, how was I ever able to see anything on that little tiny screen? You
Right?
know?
Like if you like gone too fast, you went over the fish before you even know it, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's gone out the screen.
Yeah. So yeah, in Galveston, in our bay system, it's pretty shallow, so where it's not like you're not going to really find fish on it. But if you have enough experience, you can definitely even just by looking at the bottom structure, be like, oh yeah, that's shell, or that's sand. It looks like hard packed sand, or it looks mud. And that's really all I use it for.
And that's
Um,
good information, right? For like
yeah.
certain times of the year. Like those are things that you're targeting is mud bottoms or hard shell bottoms, or reef structures. Like certain things like that are important in certain times of the year,
Yeah,
right?
it's mainly mainly winter. I will say I've had a situation in where during the
I'm sorry.
winter. Yeah, no, no,
That last comment got me.
yeah, yeah, just for
It's
the winter.
yeah. It's funny though because he says that. I actually used to test the bottom with the quarter-ounce jig head, quarter to half-ounce jig head.
I
That's how I
just
would
did the
test.
whole stakeout stick and just poke around.
Yeah, well, I mean, I
Um,
don't fish as shallow as you guys though,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
but
so
like I was out on this reef, and like I was just like the fish should have been there. I've been catching them the previous few weeks, and I just couldn't find them. Um, and I was just, whenever I can't find fish, I do a lot of drifts just because you can cover more water that way. And I started drifting and I started catching this fish in this certain area, and I couldn't oh, I'm every single time in this area, I I got a bite. And it turns out whenever I was going in the area, it went from hard shell to shell mud. It was the edge of the reef.
mm,
Um, and I'm like, okay, so maybe they're like staging up in this transition. So at the time, I was just drifting the middle of the reef. It was all hard reef, and I started targeting those edges. That's where all the fish were. They just weren't on the reef; they were off the edge. Um,
mm,
it wasn't any depth change or anything like that. It was just the transition between hard shell and mud and shell. So
yeah, that sounds like Confederate reef. No, I'm
it,
just kidding.
it, it definitely was not Confederate reef, but but yeah, so having where I was, it was like 4 foot. So unless I was waiting and it was shallow, I wouldn't have known that. Except for I just started noticing those changes on the graph. Just it going from really jagged to kind of the hard, from really solid bottom to kind of softer, and it wasn't as jagged anymore. So I'm like, that's probably why it is. And then you did the whole stake out pole test and just poked around, and you could feel it. So yeah. All right. I know we covered a lot. It's, as always, we could be just talking for hours and hours, but I don't think
Yeah, because I
anybody.
feel like we talked like a quarter of what I wanted to say about night fishing.
Yeah,
Very passionate about it. I think we got some good points out though, for sure.
we did. And as I don't think anybody wants to listen to us talk for 3 hours. I don't want to listen to myself talk for 3 hours. So, um, I wanted to thank y'all guys for tuning in. Which, by the way, if you're listening to this through podcasts, we are live. We try to be live every other Tuesday. Merrill and I have both been busy, so we haven't really been able to stick into that schedule. But we try to be live every other Tuesday. You can find us at facebook.com/One Last Cast Podcast. Also, you can find us online at onelastcastpodcast.com. I promise at some point I'm going to update some of the blogs on there. I recently had a report, did really well. And definitely want to put that onto our website. And for those of you who are on here and those of you who are listening, we want to do a slideshow kind of thing on our introduction before we go live. So at the beginning of every single show, we go live, and basically we're making sure everything's getting ready for us to go. We usually go live, even though we're technically live at 7:00. Our feed starts at 6:57. And we want a slideshow of your catches. So if you could just message us, and send images, we would greatly appreciate it.
And they
Some of
post
the
it on our
catches.
page,
Yeah,
too, right? Just
uh, I,
post it.
I'll. I don't think they
No.
can post directly to our page because
Oh, okay.
yeah. But just message it to us through a messenger, or you can email us if you want to email. We can email us at onelastcastpodcast.com. I'm sorry, onelastcastpodcast@gmail.com. And just send us your images, and we'll put it up there. And it doesn't have to be anything spectacular. We don't want your best catches, just whatever you've been catching out there. We want to see it. Yeah, Curtis, you're a little late. We started at 7. The last episode was at 8. So sucks to be you. But yeah, thanks you guys for listening. We really appreciate you guys being on here. Yeah, and before we hop off, definitely want to give another shout out to our sponsors, Knocking Tail Lures. If you're looking for a paddle tail with the built-in rattle, it makes all the difference. You can go to knockingtaillures.com. Also, Dirty South Kayak Anglers, or DSKA, a great group of guys and gals talking fishing and kayaking up and down the Texas coast. Search them on Facebook, DSKA or Dirty South Kayak Anglers. And also 4A Printing. If you're looking for custom merch, such as our towels, who Aaron does a great job with it, or buffs, if you reach out to Aaron at 4A Printing, he'll get you hooked up. Also, Merrill's lovely wife, Brittany Solesky. If you're looking for real estate here in Houston, Texas, either commercial or residential, give a shout out to her, 281-740-0498, or brittanysolesky@gmail.com. All right. We covered a lot. I know we didn't get to cover everything that we wanted to, but Merrill, you want to finish us off with some words of wisdom before we go?
Yes. Have fun out there, guys, and be safe. Make sure you have a whistle, 360 light when you're out there at night, PFD on, and
Go with it, buddy.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, try to go with somebody. I know I got a lot of friends that go solo, but yeah, try to go with somebody because it can get a little sketchy out there sometimes.
It can. I will say that waiting at night, definitely bring a buddy with you. It can get sketchy out there. I'm usually not apprehensive fishing because fishing is very calming and my way to decompress. But waiting at night kind of gets the heart rate up just a little bit. So, but yeah, thanks for joining us. You guys stay safe. Rain's coming. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you out in the water.
Take care, guys.
Take care.